Hey everybody, Tall Family Films here. Today we're going to be replacing a radiator due to an accident on a 2008 Pontiac G6. Now there was a considerable amount of body work that had to go into fixing the G6, and I'm just going to really fast forward through all of that. There's another whole video that you can watch on my channel that shows you exactly how we did all that, but this is the basics of it right here. Okay, so we're removing the radiator hoses at this point. So there's one on the left side of the radiator, one on the right side. One brings hot coolant in, it goes through the radiator, comes out, cooled somewhat. On the other side, certainly not to a safe touching level, but a lot cooler than it came in. Normally, you'd be able to just separate the condenser from the radiator at this point, the air conditioner condenser, but you can't do that in this particular situation because of the accident. These two were kind of crushed together, so the separation's not as easy. It does become possible, but there was some more accommodations we had to make in order for that to happen. Okay, so to make this a little bit easier to separate the two, there's two bolts that attach the condenser to the radiator. One's right here, you can see the head of it there. On the exact same place on the other side of the radiator, other side of the condenser, is another bolt, a matching bolt. They're both 10 millimeter. So it's a common theme of 10 and 7 millimeter bolts in this project. So right here, notice my brother try to pinch his left hand off, get it stuck in the frame of the car. This is just pure manhandling, detangling metal in order to free the radiator from where it's entrapped in the car. You wouldn't normally be going through this. But the metal has to be bent back out here. One thing you should also notice is the hood latch is still in place here. That's going to disappear in a future frame because we removed it. You will not get the condenser or the radiator to come up with the hood latch in place. Just like the rubber bumper, this is just GM engineering that requires the hood latch to be removed. So you remember those two bolts that I talked about. Here we are actually removing them. So there's the left side. Notice there's air conditioner lines actually attached to the condenser still, so we do have to take some consideration in how much we can move the condenser. There's the bolt from the right side of the condenser. So that'll allow these two to actually separate somewhat.
Lift up on the radiator. Yep, there you go.
All right, so one thing to note, remove the headlights. It's going to make your life a lot easier. It is just two bolts and a wire that connects to the bulb. Very simple to take out, and then it gives you a lot more access into this area that you can see here. Okay, so all the clips and everything are removed. We're now able to get the condenser out of the way. We just simply stood it up on its side. Like I said, this condenser has no freon left in it, so not a lot that we had to worry about in this particular instance. Once that's out of the way, then we have a little more direct access to the radiator, but it is still attached. It's still, you can see it has the radiator hose on this side, and you can see one of the two transmission cooler lines that are also still attached to it. So transmissions do cool themselves through the radiator as well. There's like an inside tube inside the radiator. This will be fun. No, actually it won't be fun. I'm speaking of this tool that is supposed to remove transmission cooler lines, and it doesn't. It has several different sizes on the same tool. It's kind of a multi-tool, and none of the multis actually did anything to remove this transmission line. So we're going to tackle this with a manual method that you'll discover in just a minute here. But using the tool was completely useless. So for this particular car, I would say don't go buy this tool. You will probably see it in other videos or other recommendations on the web, but this doesn't work for this particular job here. Much easier to go at it manually. So to do the manual method, you're going to need to get a small pick. I'll put a link to one in the description. There's nothing special about it. It just needs to be small enough to get under this metal ring. This ring, you can see it moving. It goes around the nut. Don't loosen the nut. There's another seal underneath the nut that goes into the radiator. that may not seal back properly, and this is pretty important because it cools the transmission line. So the clip is now off. Put your thumb over it so it doesn't go flying off. It's not spring loaded, but here's a good look at it. Then just simply pull the transmission line back. So the transmission goes into the radiator to cool itself, the fluid does, but the two fluids, the engine coolant and the transmission coolant, do not mix, and you do not want them to. That's why we don't loosen that nut as part of this procedure. So some things you learn as you go along, and this is one of them. There's a little more body work I didn't do, so that's simply removing a little more trim so that I can get access to the radiator hose. There was a clip right here, a plastic clip that I didn't remove right here. Would have made that removal a little bit simpler than it was, not that it wasn't easy to begin with, however. So unhook the radiator hose, pull it off, and let the radiator fluid that's in there leak out. If you're replacing a radiator that doesn't have a hole in it, you might have a lot more fluid. You probably want something in there to catch it. So then separate the fan housing from the radiator so that you can actually pull one or the other out. And in our case, a little bit of maneuvering and the radiator is able to free itself from the mangled mess. Alright, so watch yourself pulling the radiator out. Remember, it is something that holds a lot of fluid. Don't pour it all over yourself. And here's a good look at it. So that's what the accident did. Put a nice dent right in the middle of the radiator. You can see it definitely went all the way through. So that radiator is toast. Before you put a replacement part in, it's always good to lay the new part next to the old part. You can see all the holes are in the same place. Transmission cooler lines look to be identical. There is some grommets on the old radiator that are not on the new one. We might have missed this if we didn't lay them side by side. So this is one of those examples where it's a really good idea to take the couple of seconds that it takes to do this. One of the things we discovered was that the fan was also destroyed, so we needed an entire new fan housing. So this is the new fan housing, and this is basically Tetris, trying to figure out how exactly does it go in. When you are in this situation, it'll all make a lot more sense to you. You'll do the correct gyrations to make the fan fall into place. Alright, so once you get the fan housing, and you may have better luck putting the fan housing in without the radiator attached. We did try that and it did not work as well for us. We couldn't quite get the radiator back in that way without it contacting the front bumper. Perhaps if your front bumper hasn't been pushed in 8 inches, you might be able to get the fan housing in without putting the radiator attached to it. But in our case, this was the easiest method. One note of caution, you don't want to damage the new radiator, and in your case, if your condenser is not also damaged, you don't want to damage it as well. So once you do get the condenser in place, there's some clips on each side of it. We just used a vice grip to sort of mate the condenser and the clip that holds it onto the radiator, just like this. And that's pretty much it. Now we just need to reassemble the car, but don't forget to put the fan housing clips back on. Here's one of the connectors for the fan, and the other connector for the fan is right here. Okay, so get your two fan housing connectors back on. One thing I wanted to show is on the radiator, this is the clips that we were doing, so I'm giving you a demonstration on the old radiator. So the clip just goes around the nut and literally just snaps on. My new radiator came with clips. I didn't have to reuse mine, but if you do need to, that's what you're trying to do. There are 3 holes in the nut. Placement doesn't matter. You can use any of the 3. I feel compelled to mention that if you are trying to repair a car that was in an accident and there's any major structural damage, you should consult a professional body shop You don't want to be driving a car that isn't safe on the road. If this video helped you, you can help me by subscribing to my channel. It really does make a difference. Thank you.